Hi, Trey.
How's it going?
Good. Hey, you got a stubble.
Yeah, I got a little stubble. I'll fix that. Maybe. You got some
Oh,
serious
I got some serious stubble.
stubble to be proud of.
No. Yeah. What do we want to talk about today?
There's actually something a little on my mind. It may be a little divergent, but what the hell? What does it matter at this point?
Exactly.
Um, uh, and I'm curious about. I've been having this thing. I want to talk about composition,
Mhm.
and I'm curious about your perspective on. And we don't have to talk about it much, but I ran across something this week. I started writing more seriously this week on this project that you know about, but I'm doing a recording of with just the instrument, no other instruments, and kind of approaching it like as if you had kind of a string quartet of our instruments.
Yes.
It's loosely,
Mhm.
and sometimes it goes really well. I'm just writing, and then I have to go back and play everything. But sometimes it goes really well, and there's been big gaps. I've been working over the last few years, and I just kind of got back in a couple of weeks ago, and um, started approaching one of the pieces that really kind of goes a little further out where I had planned. Like there's some distortion. I wasn't going to use any distortion. I was just
Mhm.
going to use just the clean sound. But this thing needs that, and it's a little bit groovier and chunkier and more rock. Like if you had one, okay, this is the thing we'll get to here. If there were drums, it would be really easy to do it.
Mhm.
Because the musical structure can kind of sit on top of that energy, and where you want um, uh, more drama, the drummer just turns up the drummer dial, right? And the music basically stays the same, or you kind of you know what I mean, like the
Yeah.
architecture of the music stays the same. So I don't have that. So I was working on uh, this pretty cool chord sequence that chunks that wraps up a section near the beginning, and then it wraps up the ending. And near the beginning, it's kind of a boo, 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 with these modulations. Boo, boo. Pretty simple, but kind of cool. Works totally fine in the beginning of it, at the end of the beginning of the piece. Then there's a middle section. Then we go to the end, and now I'm extending this chord progression. It wants to just keep going and going and going. And man, it just was getting. After I went back and to revisit it after like 6 or 8 months, it's not that it goes on too long, but it just gets monotonous. It just gets. So I thought, okay, it's heavy. I can do. I'll add some. It's like power chordy. I'll add some. Some chromatic walk downs here and there, just to throw it off, just to make it more exciting. Because, like I say, if Pat's playing along, well, you don't have to do anything. You just play the freaking notes, and it gets more exciting. And then he overdubs some squeaky chairs and a little mousy sound and a garage door slam at the end, and you've won the game, right? But
Mhm.
I don't have that. So I was like, okay, so what I do is I make a little mix, put it on MP3 on my phone, and when I'm driving errands, I listen in the car. I was like, okay, well, this is where it should start. Okay, it goes fine for this long, and then like somewhere around 7 or 8 times through the cycle, or into the cycle, it needs a little chromatic link. So I came back, I wrote a couple of things like, okay, that's cool. I like that. Now I'll do another one of those, and then I'll just change the rhythm a little at the end. So it's just kind of mutating a little bit and getting a little more unsettling. seemed great. Next day I listened in the car, I was like, ah, shit. It's like kind of a little awkward, like the hits kind of come in awkward ways. So I was like, okay, I'll do it again. And I did it again. And still, I felt like I got the right spot for it to start to deviate, but then I couldn't. It was kind of jumpy, and again, even jumpy as they were, if you had a drummer, no big deal. So the next day I woke up and I thought, fuck, you know what I have to do is I really need to just learn this whole section on the instrument and then just play it. So that's what I did. Not that I didn't know it, but I was in composer mode, not player mode. So now I went into player mode, and it was relatively easy to find the right thing. And the right thing was close to what I had been doing for 3 days, but it was also some kind of funny choices. Like the chromatic lines started on a different note that, like, intellectually I didn't think of, because it didn't obviously fit the pattern. And of course now it's like been another day. It's like, okay, now it totally makes sense. But super interesting. Like there's it wasn't just I'm trying to figure it out, and this is what I kind of want to throw up on the table. It wasn't just that. Okay, there's a little bit of like, okay, now it's a physical thing, right? Like there's a physical human doing a physical thing, and now you're gonna physically make the phrase in a way that's organic, or whatever you want to say. It goes with the physical body, we can play anything, and that's what, relatively, that's kind of what you and I've been working on for decades, is to be able to play anything. But still, there's stuff that resonates and stuff that feels good to play, and so it was kind of that, but only a little bit. And then it was also a little bit of it was not, I felt, well, this is an interesting question. It wasn't so much like, oh, I have this deep relationship with my instrument, so I just need to play it on the instrument, man, and it'll come out. It actually felt like I could hear better what the right thing was, because of, I don't know, all those variables. And it's great. It's also a little frustrating because I can't really write this whole thing. It doesn't work to write a whole string quartet from your violin part. I don't think. I mean, I can't. Maybe, but I'm looking at this whole project like, am I going to need to go in and be playing every single part in the composition process, or away from it, So I just throwing that up there. What do you got? And is there any connection to how you worked with the string quartet, or is that a totally different way of writing for you?
No, I mean, I can answer as a composer and as an instrumentalist, and also as a teacher, a composition teacher, right?
Yeah.
So, like, first of all, like what you said about, like, if there were drums, it would be easy. Okay. So if you say something like that, it's sort of like, and I say this in the nicest way possible, it kind of means that there's something lacking in the composition.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's kind of obvious.
Well,
right?
it's a crutch that we use as rock musicians, having a drummer.
Yes.
And it's built into the form to a degree. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. And so what does a drummer provide? A rhythm, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So the interesting thing here is that we're actually talking about rhythm, even though you have your composition with your chords and stuff.
It's really,
it is about rhythm. And rhythm is also represented in articulation. So rhythm does not mean you have to have a complex rhythmic line, or it's about how short, how long the notes are, and also how they are being played dynamically. So, for example, when you described what the outro part sounded like like one of the associations I had was like, okay, play it very softly, like softly or muted or something like that, and make it sound completely different than the intro. Don't kind of like, reprise the musical material, but don't reprise the energy of it, right? So try to give a different energy to it. And at that point, then maybe halfway through, because that section is longer, right? At the end, maybe you drop one voice of the 4 notes and turn one of them into like another melody or something, right? So you would kind of like, and I think that would actually be a solution, a potential solution, even there. So softer, maybe thin out the material, add another melody. That's something like what you did with those chromatic runs, then I guess.
Yeah,
right?
So, I mean, this is and we're talking a little bit abstractly. This is this is much more muscular than those pieces, but I think you kind of get that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, but I still think that these principles apply anyway. Like no matter which energetic level you are on, it kind of like works. And it's again, like if you're talking about the rock musician approach, like the idea would be to have the finale like louder or right or pushing more, and I think in sort of like traditional instrumental forms, that's not necessarily the case. I mean, quite often this is the case actually, but it doesn't have to be. Right?
But it's usually done in it's done in the architecture of the music, not in the performer like jabbing more energy in, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly. But like more like playing softer, for example, can mean more energy, more intensity, right? Or having a different tempo there, like slowing it down or speeding it up, or all these things are available at all times. And really, that's kind of like what my initial reaction to it was. But then, not having heard the piece, well, what do I know, right? But when I write, I have sort of I'm coming from a completely different place, where I do sort of inject everything, and I mean that literally, like everything, the whole world, into that musical material already, so that when I actually work with the musical material, I don't have to ask these questions. I can sort of like trust the process that the player, and this is why it's interesting that you mentioned that you then had to play it, right? So the player sort of like takes part of the or carries part of the responsibility for the composition. And this is sort of what you describe, that you sort of like you have to bring yourself as a performer into the picture, and then you get the ideas, or you get like pointed to where you need to make changes, and like you say, maybe you discover pitches or rhythms that you wouldn't have thought of, right? And I think it's kind of like, it's important. And so for my process, I try to leave the performer part out for as long as possible, and I try to imagine what could this sound like if performed. And so it's sort of like these. So the stage of then applying dynamics markings, for example, all right, is the very, very last thing I do. Especially because I do want to have the pitch structure and everything totally complete and laid out. And then it's just a matter of kind of like getting into, do I want things to kind of like go down here, go up there, blah, blah, blah. It's almost like, it's like painting a second layer onto your painting, right? It's almost as if what is underneath is not that important anymore. It's like you're drawing like windows onto a canvas, and you can see the underlying picture underneath, So that's sort of how
that's making a larger shape too, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And this larger shape is And this is sort of like one of the problems also for, I find, like a lot of compositions that I see. But I go on YouTube and I watch like score videos of contemporary stuff, right? And the problem I have with a lot of music that's new music is that it seems as if, and I'm only, obviously I'm not talking about the great stuff here, okay? Well, but some, it's like
It takes so much work to make even the mediocre stuff.
it takes a lot of work, but what happens usually is that the form of the material and the form of the articulation or the expression or that second layer or third and fourth layer, however you want to think about it, is sort of like tied to the form of the initial material. And that is sort of like something that is bores me to death, right? When I see, okay, like there's like this section, and then after that section we get a change, right? Like the material changes and the dynamic level changes, or right, or I find that extremely uninspiring. So that's why I approach things sometimes even forcefully, where I say, okay, like I have this pattern for, or I have this structure for the pitch material, I have this structure for the rhythms, I have this structure for the dynamics, and I only combine them. I compose each of those layers, independently, and then put them together, right? So so that, like I say, like a larger form or like a meta form appears once you put these things together.
And is that partly because this is a simplifying question, is that partly because you want to surprise yourself?
I guess yes, because like I want to enjoy the music that I make.
Right. But I mean, there's something it's something unexpected even comes from the process.
It does, but I don't think that it is actually something that you could really hear when you listen as a, when you're just the recipient of that music, right? Of those sounds. I still, the idea is still to make it sound organic and natural and intentional.
Okay.
It's not about the creating an effect, let's say. It's more about getting I mean, the funny thing is, like, I think nowadays I could write like that even without these crutches of composing things separately, right? Like I already have a sense for these you could say like overlapping cycles of like these different levels that we can put into a composition, right? So but I think it just helps to sort of like have these parameters on different train tracks, sort of like, right? And yeah, it's not about surprising myself so much anymore. It's probably to make sure I don't fall into a pattern that is sort of like a pattern of which I just said that I believe I don't even have that pattern anymore, but I still, that's maybe what I would be afraid of. But then I have all sorts of different modes of composing anyway, and there's like one mode which is like totally intuitive, where I just like say I just play, sit at the piano and I play, and like if things come out just without any concept. Yeah. But
it's funny, when I've been listening back to, I kind of have this, I keep for this project, I keep a folder, and whenever I get a new final version, I put it in that folder, so everything's in there. And I went back and listened to some stuff from not that long ago, but weirdly, the stuff that I kind of made the most outrageous, sometimes even random choices, are the stuff that is still, it's actually become more interesting over time. Strange changes, or just like, I'm just going to go here now, and I don't even care how I get over here, I'm just going to do it this way. And then it's actually it's still refreshing, even though it was awkward to listen to at the time.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. Like, I just put out one of these podcasts with Sean again, like the third one with Sean Crowder. And it was interesting, like, because we kind of like ended up talking for 45 minutes about like why you do want to learn all 12 notes, right? Why you want to make mistakes as you improvise, why you want to play that sour note, right? And it's a little bit like this, when you say
It
like,
is.
in your composition, you're
It's
making
just
this
another
random choice.
flavor.
Like
it's just another flavor. Don't cut it out.
Yeah, it's another flavor, and maybe it's like random, right? But who cares? Like it really opens the door, or it's sort of like the background to the foreground, right? So you have like something that without, like without death, there's no life, and that's kind of like how I see it. Like the black keys define the white keys.
Right.
And so I think it's really that's why one of the ways that I compose, like one of the tools, pretty simple, is using dice, right? So then
Right.
the technique is great though, because it does not feel like I'm not composing, because first of all, I'm the person who decides to use that, dice. So okay,
and you
so
decide how to use them.
Exactly. And then like say I have a row of pitches and a row of note values, right? Just put them together, and then it doesn't stop there, right? So then you can say, okay, now I'll harmonize this. And the act of harmonizing the random melody, right? Obviously you need to harmonize in such a way that it turns into something that you enjoy listening to, or that sounds great to you, right? But it's possible, like you can take any random musical material, and by working with it, like not by changing it, by working on it, by adding things, you can turn it into something great. And that should be, that's sort of why generally I don't like the idea of less is more. Like because it's sort of bullshit. It's kind of like, it's bullshit in the sense that people get something wrong, because when they talk about less is more, what they mean is less quantity, more quality, right? But that doesn't have to be the case. It can be more quality, right? So more is more, right? And this is how I that's why I think that any sort of choice you make, and even if you leave that choice of pitch to a die, right? It's or two dice. You get something that you have to make work, and in a way, that's the definition of what I think a composer is. A composer is not just like an antenna that. I mean, maybe there are people like that, okay, but it's not like that for me. It's not like I receive and I write it down. No, I receive the impulse to create something, and then from then on out, it's problem solving.
Right.
And that is what I think what usually composers do. And then you have like a certain kind of composer, people who have developed a toolbox to create movie soundtracks, let's say. So they have all the modules available already, and it's basically then, I don't want to say just, it's kind of mix and match. It's still problem solving.
The form is known. There's so many parameters already determined that you're kind of shaking it.
Yes. Yeah. So really, I think that
I used to envy that situation. I used to think that actually for a long time I would feel like, man, why can't I just be a heavy metal guitar player? Like you know what you need to play. The audience knows how to listen to it. You know how to do it. And it's just like the language is there. You don't have to fucking build a language and build the instrument and teach the audience and learn yourself. It's just there. Now I don't feel like that anymore, but it's on and off. It's been like that.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, I don't know. I wasn't even able to envy people like that, because it's just so far beyond my horizon to be that way, right? I think you just need to be a certain personality to be able to do that. Just like, you know, what I do, you need to be a certain, like, you need to be ignorant in a way, right? and it's yeah, I don't know, you know, like, I think what we like, what years ago when you talked about your um how did you call it, like developing your voice, right? Like as a
Oh,
musician,
on the
you know
YouTube.
what you know what I
Yeah,
mean, right?
yeah.
Yeah. So this I think it's sort of a little bit like you are what you eat, when people say that,
Mm,
right?
mm,
And it is like that with becoming an instrumentalist, becoming a composer, like the tools that you develop, like your diet, right?
mm.
As in your the music you listen to, the books you read, the kind of music theory you study, the way that your brain processes music, right? Like it's something that you would want to work not on the actual music, not on the composition, but you would work on these tools
Your diet.
on your diet. Yeah. So and then so at the end, like when you compose, you compose what your diet sort of like has programmed your body to do, right? And so that's why I think that that's kind of like a guaranteed success, like if you want to develop your own voice, right?
Mm,
Like develop the tools, develop your own method. um, yeah, baby, build your own instrument. I'm not that kind of guy. I mean, even though I did, but it's not about inventing the instrument, right?
right,
Um,
right.
but yeah, that's sort of like the easy way to find your own voice, you know.
Mm, mm, mm. You know, something you just said a minute ago reminded me of exactly what I remember David Sylvian telling me when we were working on the first day. And it's funny, I have these, I have these 8 cassette tapes of just Robert and I sitting in my back studio in New York, like in 1991,
Mhm.
putting together ideas, of which many of them became on the Sylvian Fripp record. And so we wrote um, like the more, I don't know what you call it, the more crimsony, more asymmetrical, rhythmic, strange stuff that's on that record. Um, Kind of Robert and I already had the ideas together. We just kind of arranged them, and we recorded them with Jerry at Dreamland. There were no vocals, and um, you know, David had a few songs, but did they even make it on the record? I can't even remember if they made it on the record. Anyway, uh, we had this song that we called Splatology that ended up becoming 20th Century Dreaming, which is in 5 or something. Yeah, and also Firepower as well, but Splatology. And as I remember, like there were no vocals and there wasn't really any concern. I was curious, you know, I didn't know David very well, and I'd only known Robert a few years, and he's Robert, and they've worked together for decades, or you know, if it were
Yes, yeah.
me, I would have been like, when's the vocals coming? You know, like, or is this going to be instrumental? Because it's going to be instrumental. We need to do something different. And you know, we didn't hear any vocals, and then one day, all the vocals were there, like in one day. And he found a way to not only make them fit naturally in the phrasing within us, but really odd lyrics that all tied together. And I was like, what the fuck? How did you come up with that? And it literally was like, it wasn't like we're working it. He was never working it. He just showed up one day you know, after a few hours, it was basically all there. You know, whereas I would be trying stuff over weeks, you know, like, I like that. I like that. He just did that. And, you know, I asked him, I was like, how did you, like, was that hard? Or was like, he's like, no, I can write to anything.
Mm.
And that was cool. It was like, yeah, that's a, you know, it's half competence, but also, why shouldn't I be able to write to anything?
Yeah.
I can just write to anything, you know, and that it's good is nice. But it wasn't even that. It was like, and I don't even know. I've seen David wrestle. One of his other songs we didn't record, and he was still wrestling. It was a beautiful song. We played it as a trio, but he was still like, I don't know, this chord part here, I'm not sure yet. You know, so he didn't not wrestle, but it was a fascinating thing. And of course, that's what you get. That's what you get with collaboration, is that somebody throws you something that you wouldn't make for yourself, right? Like, you know, you're challenged, and that challenge of being thrown material that you want to merge something with, kind of throws you off your stool in a normal way, and now you have to,
Yeah, you see, and that's sort of like what you can create for yourself, even if you're on your own, right? You can use dice, you can use cards with ideas on them that you draw out of a hat or whatever. Like there's all sorts of ways you can kind of like predefine the structure of the song, but there's no song, right? And you write the song into the form, right? Like you can create these starting points that basically are collaborators now. Then you know those, and I find that, like, as a musician who's more sort of like also, let's say, a researcher, right? Like it's not necessarily, I've never been about creating the perfect piece or even, I don't even want to be great at something, right? It's not about me. It's about, I mean, in the end, it's about me because I want to hear the result of the research. You know, I want to find out what that experiment sounds like. And sometimes I, you know, I feel quite often, like maybe like a third of the time, that my work is a failed experiment.
That's
But
not a bad
then,
ratio.
say it again.
That's not a bad ratio.
You think so?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, like a third of the experiments, really, I would say, yeah, no, it's failed. But then even that doesn't stop me from doing it again. So that is kind of like the interesting aspect, that in a way you could say maybe I'm somewhat ignorant because I don't want to learn 100% from my failures, because I still believe in the original idea somehow. So that's why I'm also, over the course of my career, I'm creating variations of the same idea somehow to just see, is there anything in there that is worth exploring? And, yeah, and yeah, you know, this for me, I would say it's a continuum of, on one side you have like total freedom, intuition, right? And on the other side you could have like a totally predetermined piece of music where you don't allow yourself any influence, right? And I think that what sort of like is my take on that is that I want to be able to very, very quickly kind of go back and forth and assume any position like between these two poles, right? Like the idea to kind of always, not necessarily like being aware, you know, but aware of the fact that I am good at moving on this continuum, right? And this is sort of like what I think is a great, very human capability. Like we can have emotions on one side, we can have reason on the other side, right? And what makes humans great is that we use both. We need both. We are both. We're not just one of those. right? And in psychotherapy, this idea of trance, right? Like the moment where there's like you open up a channel to your subconscious. Is sort of like a similar thing where you go like on one side you could say is familiar, on the other side is the unfamiliar. And so this is also important for me as a composer, like because you were asking about if I wanted to be surprised, right? Yes, to an extent I wanted to be surprised, but at the same time I also want to have the feeling as if I already know this. So it's kind of like both, and it's this oscillation. In particular, with my piece Throckmorton 513, I had this idea that I want sort of like the basic structure to be so simple that everybody who listens to it, like subconsciously, kind of like gets what the progression is. But then what is kind of like built around that is so complex that at the same time, even though your subconscious knows what's happening, your conscious cannot predict what's going to come. And it's that contradiction that kind of then, like makes your mind oscillate between surprise and familiarity. Yeah. And that's where I see real power. Because that's the moment where you get in a trance, where you learn a lot, when you become you get sort of like the superpowers that humans have. Some people call it flow or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And
Go ahead.
No, I was trying to say there are many ways that you can sort of like create these situations. It's not something that's that's only for artists or like for an elite of people. No, it's just plain stuff like I don't know, like I don't know much about what you do sports wise, but with your Brazilian jiu-jitsu, I'm pretty sure that what I just described like
It's
applies.
exactly the same. Yeah.
Right. So
except your failures hurt.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of failure. It's a lot of failure, and you got to just try. And it's completely improvised.
Yes.
I mean, there's a lot of technique, but there's no. You can practice as much as you want. Well, it's just like our instruments, but there's no pure situation that happens. There's always somebody's always giving you something a little different to work with.
Yes.
It's not like every piece of music you're playing with a different drummer, or like every bar it's a different drummer, but it's something like that. Like you could even come in with the same piece, but now you have a different drummer and now it's all different. Right. Yeah. And I think, for me, as much as I have written and do write and will continue to, I feel like at my core I'm kind of an improvising musician, even though I wouldn't somehow necessarily categorize myself externally, but internally that's how I feel. And so I'm always trying to figure out ways to do that. And I can even remember like what you were saying earlier. One of the things that I used to do, it's possible that I even became an improvising musician because I needed to make up for weaknesses in compositions. And one of the things that I used to do when I was a kid, working on these 4-tracks sitting back here, I would have sections of music that made sense. They made sense in the same piece, but I couldn't necessarily I hadn't figured out yet how to make transitions between them.
Yes.
So, but there was no editing. So we would just record and just leave some space. And, but we had to get the basic tracks down, and even like committed, like we even had to bounce the drums and the guitars together. And then there would be like 8 bars. And now it's the job to figure out, okay, that's partly composition, but also improvise and figure out how to, that kind of puzzle solving. I mean, that's kind of what production is for me anyway, but that's like making yourself a place where you have to really just get the goods on the fly. Yeah.
So about 10 years ago, I had this idea for a guitar quartet, and which I then started, like, I put together a quartet with a trio from Estonia, and we only played a couple shows, so I can't remember, but it was, I actually wrote a manifesto for that. And like point one was, one idea per piece is more than enough. And I literally, I still believe that. Not just if you're approaching something like minimal music or something where you can do a lot with one idea, but I also mean that in the grandest scheme of things, even if you want to write a symphony, right? You don't need to start with two themes. You don't need to start with three themes, or like you can start with one thing, which you then kind of like develop everything else from, right? So this idea that you would have to have sections, right? Even for and that sections will come together, or that you have to kind of like create transitions. That is something that I have long left behind me. That because I believe that it's totally, well, for me, totally process based, right? So you start with one thing, and this one thing leads to another, right? And as stupid as it may sound, but if you play on a guitar and you practice 1, 2, 3, 4, okay, that's the A section. Okay, the B section is 1, 2, 4, 3, right? You see, it's like so you can just permutate what is there. Like you make your only your cell is 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you go from there. And as you compose, you will find lots of ways to modulate or transform the material into something else, and that's where your B section is. That's where your C section is, right? This is it's something that just that comes from what you already have, or at least that's sort of like my ideal, right? Like it happens very rarely that like it's that I have two separate ideas that then come together in a piece of music. It's just something that I have to say I don't even feel comfortable with somehow. And maybe it's maybe that's something that maybe like one of the big restrictions I have. Like
Yeah, because I'm actually having I'm having the opposite experience,
uh-huh.
which is I find if I can permutate forever and never get anywhere. I mean, not always, there's writing for there's kind of, I don't know what you call it, like research and development, just like what you're constantly doing, right? And then there's with a purpose. There's a show at the end of the month, or I'm getting get together with Marcus and we're going to record something, or you know what I mean? Like that everything has focus there, but I can permeate forever and come up with a million cool things. As soon as I have, but if I come up with, I mean, I call it a B section, but just if I go left field into another territory, and now I have these two things, and I'm not talking about like the feelings are totally different, but just it's the even starting with like the opposite kind of material. Now I have something. Now I have something that I have to balance, and there's a dynamic. There's like a dynamic between the things, and I realize that makes a certain kind of music, a more structured kind of music. But for me, it gives me, at least right now, it gives me. Now I'm looking at how things are weighed. Like it's not all straight lines. Then there's a big curved one. Okay, now how do I get them on the page, and how do I do that? And so for me, that's very helpful at the moment. Different approach, and
probably not. This is sort of
maybe
like
not.
what I find interesting is like you could also approach things from a meta position, right? And you could say, okay, so there's Trey who's composing right now, and there's the material, but there's also Trey who kind of like moves out of the situation and looks through the glass roof, and and sees what you do, right? And that Trey sees what the commonality or what the relationship is between these two sections where you don't see it because you're too close to it, but there's something in common. And I believe me, like if you had a composition lesson with me, I would convince you that section that you think is completely different comes from a different place. I would show you how it transforms from the one idea to the other. And obviously this is sort of like kind of like a trick, because you can always find these translations that take you from one state to another, and you just need to be kind of you need to have the craft, and you need some certain artfulness to be able to do that. But if you could also, and this is sort of what I meant originally when I was talking about the permutation of ideas. It's not literally like 1 2 3 4 and 1 2 4 3, right? It's more about becoming aware of your toolbox. Like so you sort of whenever you like I do these exercises with people where I ask them to kind of like I give them 3 chords, and I ask them to write the 4th chord, right? So, and then I ask you, like, can you explain to me what was your thought process? Why did you put that 4th chord? And then they would say something, and then say, okay, like, and all the inner dialogue basically that kind of like gets put outside can be written down. You can say, okay, so I thought that it would be great to end up like a half step up from where we started. So then, then I would ask the person to write, Trey wants to end up a half step above from where he started, right? Like, and you do that over and over again, like in the process of composition classes, right? And you sort of develop this box of things that you do, right? And then, like, the easiest way would be to write these all on cards and put them in, and you can just draw them out, right? And you see, but the beautiful thing is what happens once you have this written down. Like you draw a card and you say, oh yeah, this is what Trey would do. But since I know now, I'm aware that this is what Trey would do. Oh, let me do the opposite, or let me go down a half step, not up a half step, right?
That's exactly what I thought. Like growing up in Texas, we have to do it the opposite. We just have to do it the opposite. So I'm going to draw a card, and whatever it says, I'm going to do the opposite.
Yes, and so that's kind of like that's the kind of spiritual or mental permutation that I'm talking about. It's not a mathematical thing, but it's sort of like becoming aware of how you approach things. You're basically installing new branches in your decision trees that you have available, and that's sort of why I would say that maybe your A and your B section, they are very much related, even though you're not.
Yeah, aware. Well, and also it's almost like it just starts. You start. For me, I start with kind of a left field idea, but then you weave the threads, across, and you weave these threads over here, and these threads start to come back, which is kind of why I don't. I used to kind of kick myself for taking so long to write music, but now I don't, because the more it never goes bad. It actually, I mean, I'm not saying that it always gets better, but there's always, like, the tapestry, just everything that's happened since the last time gets woven in, and connects things, and yeah.
With composition, I think there's a lot a long gestation period, and that again that we're usually not even aware of. Like when people say, "Oh, I've written Love is a Battlefield in 5 minutes," right? Yeah, you did well there in that, but you had that melody, those ideas, that mood that has been with you since you were 11, right? And trust me, that's the way it goes, right? Like it's not like things just appear out of nowhere. Like we are beings we are aware of the passage of time, and as time passes, like things start accumulating, and when they accumulate and there's enough push, they kind of like get pushed out of that skin, which, you know, that creative, whatever I want to call it, you know what I mean, right?
Mm.
Like, and then it gets pushed out and there it is, but sometimes you don't even know how long you've been chewing over something. So with
Yeah, and you might think that, well, this was really quick, but the next one's really going to take a long time, right?
yes, yes.
Yeah, it's not. I think you make a good point. Is that we do all these efforts, but really, it kind of almost doesn't take place in time anyway. We're just kind of sewing it together in the. Um,
You know, also this idea of
we have, you know, because we're also working with this recorded medium. It's a strange new thing for music that's closer to the painting world and the sculpture world. You know, that wasn't the case, you know, until 100 years ago.
yeah, you know, there are many threads that I want to still respond to. Like one is, for example, for me as an, you know, English is not my mother tongue, right? And so there are certain words, certain phrases in English that sort of, and you know, I know it's maybe stupid, but like when people talk about muscle memory, right?
Mm-hmm.
For me,
Yeah.
it's very literal muscle memory. Like, okay, that's the word that you use for muscle memory, but what is it really? Is it muscle memory? No, it's not muscle memory. It's not that the muscle memorizes anything, right? It's you know, it's in a different on a different level of processing. It's not the muscle. And when I point that out, it's sort of like, as people kind of can get a little amused by that, right? Because obviously, uh, when I then describe what muscle memory is, like in my words, people say, "Oh, that's muscle memory," right? So because that's the way language is, right? But I find that the idea to try to be like really specific with words also is something that really helps. It's some sort of musical thinking.
Mm.
It really you're not kind of like taking for granted that's like a phrase of music translates to a specific meaning, right? Like, so you need to break it down into the smallest parts, right? So that you know you really need to describe what you mean with muscle memory,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
And that's sort of how I would approach writing music that says muscle memory, right?
Mm.
I would just assume that I can say muscle memory and it means muscle memory.
Right.
This is
Right.
kind of stupid thing, but
No. I get you.
you know what I mean? It's really interesting. And then and we have used this word a lot in the context of music. Musicians, composers, like they talk about ideas, right?
Mm.
And I do it too.
Mm.
I think it's like it's a very inappropriate word to describe what we're dealing with.
For phrases of music or whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
It's not an idea. It's not an idea. It's something concrete already,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
And uh, yeah. Anyway, this is like something that has been
You know,
kind of
sometimes I agree, and sometimes I use the word idea, especially when I'm talking with my coaching clients, to kind of maybe still a little vague or off the way you're saying, but more there's the notes, and then behind that, two or three spots there back, there's the idea. That's kind of how I look at it.
yeah.
And maybe that's not the best word, but it's closer to like you can take the idea and do many different things with it, and it's still it's not I don't know, you know, but the idea, the problem with that is the idea could be the order of the note. It could be manifest in the order of the notes, or it could be manifest in how we use sound design in our show together.
Mhm.
You know, that's it's not about the notes, but eventually you have to get notes.
Yes.
You know, so that's how I tend to. At
Yeah,
least
and
that
you know,
work.
that's why this this idea not to work with the, or not to not to think that you need ideas in order to be create.
Mm,
That's kind of like fascinating. That's again like, okay, you have a puzzle in front of you and you solve the puzzle, right? It's, and you're not creating the puzzle, but still you are the composer. And this is sort of like how I see it, like the solving the puzzle is the actual, is the art, right?
mm,
It's not, so it's not the idea is, it could be any idea, right? Like I said,
exactly.
you can roll dice, or you know, like you can find any sort of, you can take the heights of the summits in the Himalayas or whatever, right? And you can create a piece of music out of that. Yeah. But the way how you put this data into relation with each other, like how you translate it into sound, that you know, that's the puzzle solving, and that is the actual act of composition. You don't need, you know, like the ideas, the materials, you don't need to create them. You know, it's already there.
Mm,
It's
mm,
all there. So it's you know, just see what I mean? It's kind of
mm, mm,
really strange to even to verbalize this, but I think it's um, you know, we don't need, like some people say, you don't need to reinvent the wheel, and that's what making music is like, right? You know, you have the wheels, and with all these wheels you can build a new machine,
mm,
right?
mm,
It doesn't have to be a clock, right? You
mm,
know, or it doesn't have to be a steam engine. You can build, you know, and that's sort of like where I see music really as, or being a composer, largely as somebody who is problem solving. And that's also why in teaching composition, I think it should be, and it traditionally in some cases it's actually also, it is based on problem solving. It's like if
mm.
you have to write a 4-part uh,
Right.
vocal score, let's say, right, you have these rules, and you know, the idea is that you can solve the problem, right?
Mm, mm,
But again, there it's important that rather than like solving somebody else's puzzles, you kind of like look for your own puzzles. I mean, not the puzzle that you create, but you go out and you find, okay, oh, there's something there.
mhm,
There's like these 2 chords that Trey played on his guitar, and they sounded so awesome. My ear
mm,
just can't pick out what it is, but I want to know what it is. And then I realized, like interesting, like there's like the middle voice moves up a half step again, because that's what Trey does,
mhm.
right? And like uh and
Damn it,
that's,
you caught me.
yeah. So that's it. You know, that's the fascinating. That's the fascinating about making music.
Yeah.
And you know, like the piece we played at CProg. Like, have you? I mean, it's, again, like I wouldn't say it's the greatest thing, but like we have this really this one melody that we
Mm.
worked out, right?
It's very integrated, isn't it?
It's super integrated, but it's everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's in every section, and like as we were playing it, I didn't even realize, like I
Mm.
wasn't hearing that we're just like weaving these motifs in and out all the time. And you know, it's not something that we planned, like we were only talking about the beginning and the end,
Right.
right?
Right.
So and I think that's just so beautiful that on a certain level of musical proficiency, or you know, not just on the instrument but also like understanding,
Hmm.
as you know, as a person creating music in the moment,
Hmm.
that these things simply happen, and you don't have to force them. You don't really have to consciously say, I'm going to play this motif. No, the motif will appear automatically.
Yeah, and that's where, for me, that's where the kind of that's what happens for me in
Mhm.
improvisation. You know, at different. It's not always at the same level, but if you're just listening and following the ideas along, that happened. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
that's it's not it's not actually surprising, and it wasn't an effort. You're just, that's the topic that got thrown out on the table. So that's what we discussed.
Yes, and you don't ever need to consciously reach for those motifs, like your ear, whatever, like the whole system, ear, brain, nerves, hands, muscles, blah blah blah, creates these responses that that are how shall I say this, like copies of some sort, like distorted copies of what gets in, right? So and this has been like, I was always believing that I was capable of doing that, but I didn't really know that there was with the Crimson Project, when we did a summer in 2014, we played 60 shows or something. I think it was a lot of shows in one year. And I opened most of those concerts with a soundscape, but not just a soundscape. I was soloing on top of the soundscape. So I took like maybe 3 minutes to set something up, then I soloed, right? And then, like that was before in-ear monitoring. That was horrible sounds with the audience chatting, and so I didn't really hear much of what I was just basically playing to a drone. But then realizing when I was listening back to those recordings that like there are like certain like motifs that kind of appear in the soundscape because like the delays meet in a specific way. So it's not necessarily something that I even had already played. But then I could hear like that I was responding to that. So I was repeating phrases that were in the loopers, but not even I don't think it reached like the threshold of consciousness even in the actual performance. And that was just a wonderful experience, because that was like the moment where I realized, okay, so maybe I eventually I did get to this point that in my early life I was reading about, when musicians were talking, when John McLaughlin was saying like, yeah, you learn all the scales and then you forget them, like these kind of quotes, right? Yeah, and at some point I felt like somehow I have gotten there, and I didn't even realize that I had gotten there. And yeah.
Well, especially in that context where you're in, as a performer, you're in a bit of duress because of the context and the audience. And sometimes I've found my conscious isn't really the right word, but like my focus goes to all the duress, but you keep playing anyway. And afterwards, when you go back and listen, you don't hear the duress that you've been enduring. You just hear the the music behind it, which sometimes you don't even get to experience in the moment because you're kind of dealing with the sound, or you're sweating, or the strings, or something out of tune, or there's like just a total dick eating his enchiladas in front of you, talking to his girlfriend. I'm thinking of what's the place in New York? Daryl's house.
Daryl's house,
yeah. I played shows there where it's been really great, but also where there's like 5 people eating enchiladas right like a foot from your pedal board, and you couldn't give a shit about the music. And that's your whole experience, right? But meanwhile, the music's going on around you and through you.
Yeah, and somebody would listen to the recording of the show and get goosebumps in exactly that moment where you were angry about that dick, right?
Yeah. So this reminds me of one of my earliest performances, and this was even before. There's this tradition. I guess it's still there. I don't really know, because I haven't been involved with guitar craft so long. But this heckling situation where Robert will set up a performance situation, and then he'll just heckle the shit out of the musicians and throw peanuts at them. And I witnessed that. I'm getting a little off track, but I first witnessed it on my first guitar craft course, where we went to this pub in West Virginia, like man, it actually seems kind of mellow now when I imagine what a pub in West Virginia might be like now in the current political climate, but we did not belong there. And we were, we were getting up to play our little acoustic guitars in the corner, this total redneck pub out in the country in West Virginia. And everybody did their little performances and it was fine. And then people had gotten a little bit drunk and gotten a little more ambitious. So people started getting up and like doing extra stuff. And, I'd only met Robert 4 days earlier and we were all still nervous about him. And he's in a pub and like, are we, have we let down the formal relationship or what's going on here? What's going on? A guy got up and played, and I think it might have been James Hines III, who appears here and there, started playing something, and Robert turned to me and said, "Should I boo him?" And I was like, "Oh, that wouldn't be very nice. Don't do that." And he ordered a piece of chocolate cake and went up on the stage and smushed it on his head in the middle of the play. And mind you, for those who aren't aware of any of this, it's a little bit like it's supposed to be when the musician is completely full of themselves. It's kind of the audience's job to say, "Hey, dude." Anyway, getting back to an earlier story before that, I was playing with my band in Eugene, Punishment Farm, and we had a gig at this kind of a similar, like it's a blues rock club, like where you but we were kind of more of a punk band, and one of our first gigs there opening for a blues band. There weren't that many people yet, and we were playing, and a guy, the stage was like, this high, which was a little kind of high for that kind of a room, wasn't a big room. And there was a guy standing right under me for our whole 40-minute set. He was staring at me, just yelling at me like, "Fucking twat. You're a pussy. You can't play worth a shit." Bah, bah, bah. And just like the whole fucking 40 minutes. And it was totally true. Like it completely just galvanized my whole presence of I'm just going to play the shit out of this at you, buddy. And that's where the audience, my focus was the kind of music, it demands attitude, and this gave more attitude, sure. But my focus was this fucker's going to get every note's going to I'm going to trash his soul with every note. He was giving it back to me.
Yeah.
And we didn't even, I thought when I get off stage, should I be nervous and he was gone. I didn't, I have no idea. And it was directed towards me. It wasn't even the other band members. What the hell? What have I done to you? What are you seeing in me? Mm-hmm. That our singer really, he deserves it more than me. What do you I'm just the guitar player over here.
People, under the influence of whatever, people pick up these vibes, sometimes, and there's, and it gets amplified, and you get that sort of response, I guess. It wasn't you, it was him. He was shouting at himself. Yeah, sure. But somehow I was the right container for it. Yeah. Which I'm glad it's not like that anymore. Maybe it'll become that again as I get older. Who knows? You see, the fascinating aspect about doing electronic music, and I mean what Robert Fripp does or did with the soundscaping and what we do, which mostly electronic, right? Then in the end, is that some fans ask me the question did the audience have an influence on how you played, or and I can really after not so many years, but 10 years of playing a lot of shows, I can tell you it doesn't have an influence. Maybe I feel shit, or maybe I feel good, or it doesn't. Listening back to the performance, I can't tell.
Mm.
It's impossible to tell. And especially like what I mean, especially with the electronic music, like just imagine like the hate that Robert has, must have gotten on the G3 tours
Oh yeah.
or stuff like that. And
Yeah.
now they're putting out these like 52 soundscapes, and like 10 of them were recorded on G3 tours, right? And or shows, and people weren't listening, or they hated it, or like were saying that, thinking he was the guitar tech setting up something, right?
Right.
Like this kind of thing. But then you listen to like a piece like that, and you're like deeply moved, and it's like incredible music. And so like it has like the circumstances of performance has, and I know that like maybe even Robert himself would have a different perspective on that. But
Mm.
I believe that really music is much bigger, much stronger than any human influence or any human emotion, or it's like it just happens. And there's like, even in the worst circumstances, something can get created that is just absolutely uh, uh, not just timeless, but also how do you say, like, that it's not tied to a place,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
Like on that tour that I mentioned, like 65 shows with Crimson Project. We played in Sardinia, and we played in Norway,
Mm.
right? And like one show was super cold, and the other one was like super sweaty Saturday night overlooking the Mediterranean Sea. And listening to those two pieces, you wouldn't be able to tell. There's
Mm.
there's no difference. Like it really is just, you could say it's just me as like the filter. Um, and maybe that's what, and maybe I could say that's why I'm not a great musician, because like, what just comes out is just me, and I.
Right.
But I find it, I still find that interesting, and I really think about, and I believe in music, and to that degree that I think
Mm.
it's
Mm.
really, like, it would be arrogant to say that we really have a big influence on, well, on what I call music. Obviously, there's more than that.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
I mean,
Yeah, it's funny because we and of course, coming from the background that we have in common, there's this the sense that music is precious almost
Mhm.
doesn't make any sense.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like it's going to do its thing. You can be precious about it as you want.
Yeah,
Um,
that's kind of what I mean. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, we're the precious ones.
Yeah, I mean, it really, like, do you want to? And this is, I mean, I'm very bad at that, but I would like to be also. Why do I need to suffer if I know that what I'm going to do here as a performer is, and I just say, I'm still going to say it, is good enough,
Mm, mm,
right?
mhm,
So why do I like the photography,
mm,
right?
mhm,
Yeah, it's annoying, and sometimes I get angry, right?
mm, mm,
But then, like, why would I spend my
mm.
energy, on top of the fact that
It's
there's
annoying.
this stupid, it's annoying, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, being with Pat and Tony really, it was very good for that, because they have a very good way of dealing with such situations.
Yeah.
Even though they don't, they don't, how do you say, they don't support uh, people doing that, but they also don't condemn them.
Right. Right. Right.
So it's, yeah. I mean, what do you think about, like, I mean, there's this lady that took off her top in one of your
Oh yeah.
shows.
Oh, that
Like,
was
so
awesome.
so.
That was awesome. That was awesome. It was awesome because I mean, it's really interesting because I get I get the idea about photography and taping, and I do Well, you know what's funny about that particular incident that you're talking about in San Francisco with the Trey Gunn band, where the last piece of the show, this woman started dancing, which, well, I'll tell it the other way. The beginning of that show, we were playing in a small club for 3 nights, and this maybe second set, I can't remember if we did 2 sets or not, but we went out on stage, must have been the beginning of the show, and all these people started taking pictures.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt it was very, it wasn't like, you know, oh, you're stealing my soul. Not that that's Robert's thing, or, you know, it wasn't, oh, the, you know, you're not being present, or just any of that. It was like, I just felt really confused. Like, what are you taking pictures of? There's just 4 guys standing up here, and it's not a very nice club, and it's we're all crammed, and it's like there's nothing visually beautiful here at all. There's the lights are hanging down, and you know, we don't have glitter on or anything. And my confusion was like, what's happening here? I felt confused, and then I was like, so we either I don't think I stopped the music, but maybe after the first tune I went to the mic and I was like, I don't really understand why you guys are taking pictures, or something like that. Look, take a bunch of pictures right now. And then, you know, I even said, there's no dancing girls or anything here. Like, there's nothing to see. And so take all your pictures and then chill and just listen. And then sure enough, at the end of the show, this woman got up and danced, which for the kind of music we do, people don't dance. And then she got this guy to get up and dance with her. And then she took her top off, or I can't remember what she did. I think she even like sucked her nipple, or like, it was like like totally weird. But, you know, it was at this kind of fevered pitch in the middle of this improvisation. And it was, she was putting on a show for the room, but also it wasn't 100% an inappropriate response. Let's put it like that. You know what I mean? Like, it was her, there was some kind of almost a genuine, like, here's how I'm going to respond to this. So yeah. But for me, it's just a distraction factor. I feel like people, I get you want to take a picture or two, you know, and then don't distract us. But I don't have a philosophical issue with it.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean,
I feel like the music is, I have enough, a little harsh to say, but I feel like it's a little bit of a lack of faith that's going to corrupt something as huge as music. Okay, I'm not in huge contexts where there's 500 people doing it and bootlegging and all that, but
you know, I wouldn't take photos at a show, but it is annoying if somebody's sitting next to you or standing next to you looking at his phone, or like for the audience, I think it's horrible. Like for the musicians on stage, yeah, maybe, you know, I most of the time I tune the audience out anyway, right? Like, I have no choice because I'm focusing on.
We don't play these kind of shows. I mean, maybe you did with Townsend, but where you see, you know, you see films or shots of where everyone in the first rows, they've all got a camera holding up. We don't play shows like that. That would be tough. That would be tough.
Yes. Yeah. You know, I think I told you about this before, but I want to do this like here publicly also. There's an amazing film by a German comedian, and the film is called Jazz Club. And it's basically it's a comedy, but it's very tragic, and it's sort of like filmed in a very particular lo-fi style, you could say, right? And it's like the most amazing film about what it means to be in the arts, or in music in particular. And sort of like the way it goes is that this main guy, and the guy who wrote and plays the main part, is called Helge Schneider, and he is a jazz musician. He really is a jazz musician. And so he works in the film. He works 5 jobs. He sells fish. He's a male prostitute. He delivers newspapers, like all the cliches. Like and so the first like it's like the film is 95 minutes long, right? So in the first 90 minutes are about all the stuff, the cliches that you have to go through as a musician. So for not getting paid, the second when they're not getting paid, they're being offered pickled plums as pay, and then the next time they go ask, the owner of the club actually dies, and it's really totally over the top, right? All these things, and there's like the club is always empty, but there's like one night there's actually a guest there, and they get excited about that one guest. Turns out it's a bootlegger, right? Sitting there with a tape. So it's a really amazing film, kind of like showing all of this. And then there's like a hobo living under a bridge that he sometimes kind of plays like some sort of basketball with, right? Like this man. And at the same, he's also talking about like this great guy, Earl Mobile, which is like this jazz musician he admires so much. And obviously at the end, it turns out the hobo under the bridge is Earl Mobile, right? And so it's an amazing film. Okay, so and then you would say, okay, well, it could be over. But then the last 5 minutes are absolutely amazing. Like some aliens come in a spaceship and they pick up his band, right? And they go to some other planet. And on that other planet, there's a huge, like a football field of fans waiting for them. And they get up on that stage and they play, and it's like a huge success, right? And that's the film. I get goosebumps telling you about it.
I know. I feel like
it's absolutely fascinating. This is really kind of like, sometimes if you take it too seriously, and this is kind of like the point I was trying to make. If you take things too seriously, you really, there's no point of doing this on this planet, right? Maybe on some other planet people will appreciate it, and I know that there are people on this planet that do appreciate what I do, what you do, but just like the numbers, right? This numbers thing that we learn. I don't know, like maybe even more so you in the US, like the idea like of capitalism, and
absolutely, yeah,
and then like it turns out like, okay, if you really look at the numbers, like when people ask me, will this be a DVD? I say, well,
exactly. Yeah. If you want to pay for it, you can have one if you pay for it.
But it also shows that the real fans who sort of like have maybe no idea of the business behind it, right? They really believe that what you do is the greatest thing. Like exactly. There's this image of this has been created in an ivory tower, right, with like a huge mixing board. But no, on my laptop, like my 12-year-old laptop, it's like
right. Yeah. No, I think it is different over here. I mean, it's hard for me to judge here and where you are now, as opposed to what it was like when I was growing up. But I can remember, and I remember talking with Michael Manring and Alonso about this, and it hadn't occurred to me for decades that when I was younger, there was this idea of selling out. I don't even think it exists anymore, but there was this selling out idea. And what we were sitting around at the airport one time in Mexico, and we started talking about this. And suddenly I remembered when I was a teenager, like maybe like 18, you could tell when a band had sold out. It had nothing to do with radio play or numbers. You could hear it from the first moment you dropped the needle on the record. Like, oh, you could hear it in the music. And I remember saying that to Michael, and he was like, damn, you are right. I remember we used to be able to there was this context of like, there was this purity, and now the aim had changed, and you could hear it from the first freaking bars of music. Now we don't even, there's no way to even, it doesn't even register. I don't think, you know.
It's fascinating, because I thought about that a couple of days ago as well, that in a way, a lot of people, because selling out has been part, or that vibe, let's say, has been part of our culture for such a long time. So now it's a starting point for people.
Mm-hmm.
I really believe it is a starting point.
Yeah.
Some people, where it's not about, it's really is not about the music anymore, but it's about the feeling of doing something that will make you money.
Yeah. Yeah. Or massive attention.
Massive attention, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
But like,
Yeah.
there's so the motivation is kind of like removed from music, and
there's
I mean,
there's no artistic process except for within that purpose.
yeah. But what is interesting though nowadays, I find, is that that does not have to mean that the music is bad.
Yeah.
Right? Because like, the best example, like, that I like this image I have, like, a couple young guys, like, here in Germany in the 80s, if you liked girls that were dressed in black and, leather or whatever, like, you maybe started a band that played, what then was called dark wave or whatever, or goth rock or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you would just do that. Maybe initially you were looking to meet girls, right?
Right.
But maybe you created some amazing songs that then kind of actually meant something to people, right? So maybe it didn't mean anything to you, other than, you wanted to meet girls. But there you go. And that's another thing I find so wonderful about music, and where I really believe music is greater than any human intention, or it's totally, once it's out there as like you played a performance or it's recorded, it really takes on a life on its own, and the intentions, they don't really matter anymore.
Yeah, and also, I mean, what's interesting, especially on this of course, these guys still had to sit down and write music, so the process starts.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And also, what's interesting about this kind of selling out thing, whatever that even means nowadays, is that you really can't, except in very rare situations, you don't become successful anyway nowadays. And so that means people actually, maybe that was their aim, but in a lot of cases, they still end up doing cool stuff because they're not bound by the kind of parameters that success says the music has to be. You know what I mean? Sometimes they just run wild anyway, because it doesn't really matter what you're doing.
It's, there was a time when I was hoping that superstars, would at some, because I believe that a lot of people that are superstars are actually music lovers, right? Like even like Madonna probably loves music, and Lady Gaga. Like, and then I heard stories that Lady Gaga likes industrial music and blah blah blah, Nine Inch Nails, and right. So you would hope that, once she has enough money, right, that there would be this process where, now I can do anything. I don't care if people buy my music, and let me just do what I want to do. I already have enough money in the bank, right?
Or try something crazy.
Yeah, try something crazy. And like Madonna did something like that, where she had like some more experimental producers like working with her and stuff, right? But like, it never really went to a place where it was where you would say, okay. And I think it's probably not even the fault of the artist. It's like the structure around them.
They're kind of they're an industry with all these other people around, right?
Yes. And so somehow, and I find that really sad. Like, if you think about it, because it means that some of the musical dreams of those people will never get fulfilled, even though they could fulfill them. But they could do it.
Yeah. And, it's kind of not a great example, but Bowie seems like the one who did that. I mean, it's not a great example because he was already done so many amazing things, but then he got conventional, and then he just fucking ran off the deep end and said, fuck it, you're also reminding me of, did you know, and I haven't heard any of this for a long time, but apparently Eddie Van Halen did a whole bunch of like solo music that Warner Brothers just didn't want to deal with, and he kind of abandoned it. And apparently it was amazing and really unusual. For me, that's almost a really sad story. Like, what the hell? Come on, you could easily do that and this.
Hey, I mean, it's a super subtle thing even. Like maybe you have like the A&R guy visiting the studio while you're mixing and makes some stupid remark that just hurts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some decision gets made on the mix. Like turn down Robert Fripp's solo. No. Like that sounds like like a drill. Right? Okay, so then you turn it down. Like, and you know what I mean, right? And so I'm pretty sure that in like most like hits that we know, there's some outside influence.
There was some stuff in there.
Yeah, which like made something more streamlined. And I mean, like I know maybe it's kind of like the price. Like if you're like me and you say, like no, I don't want to, I'm not going to change anything, and like just gonna stick with what I have, that means that okay, you're not gonna be successful. Right. And I have to say that like one of my delusions is that I still believe that you can be successful doing what you do.
Right. And also I mean, what I want to say in that kind of imaginary scenario is, will prove to me that this is going to equal success. If I do it, right? Prove it to me.
Yes.
The examples really are more stacked the other way. That even if you did all that, it's, like we were saying about the sellout thing, people are going to smell it.
Hey, so for example, Peter Gabriel's "So," which was the big album, right? Right. So and I'm still wondering, like, why was that album so big? It would be so interesting to learn about the business structure behind it. Like because it's not just that the music chain was different, right? Something in the way it was presented, something in the way that it kind of like resonated with the market, made it the big success that it was. Right. And I'm sort of like as a researcher, like more interested in those aspects of popular music nowadays than in actually the production of the music. But I don't think there's much information you can find about these things.
Everybody can tell their story, and I've heard Jerry's story, which is not the through story, but I feel like those levels of success, you can't say there's so much luck involved, and like what's not in the market at that moment, what's not in competition with it, what happens, how it, he was building, there was a machine. I mean, I don't think anything makes that happen. I think it's a combination of you can't predetermine that kind of shit, in other words.
I would say it's probably naive for you to say that, because we know that there are businesses that do actually that, like the Apple laptop I have in front of me, right? Like, why do I use that? Why is Apple such a successful brand, right? Because there is a design aspect to it, and what I mean, the design, not just visual design, but just brand awareness. There is something about that, and I believe that there are artists in that field, right? Like not just craftsmen, artists in that field who can sort of like bring a product into the awareness of people. And like in the case of So, I don't know if it's true, but I'm just, the way that I'm imagining it is that maybe whatever, like Geffen Records or whatever label it was, they had like three and a half million lying around, which they needed to write off. And it was the only album they had in May, right? And so they put the money into promotion. And Peter was allowed to do that video.
Well, that's what I mean. And not that you can't make it, but Peter couldn't decide that.
No, for sure.
You know, that there's and Geffen could spend all that money and it could not work too. But
Yes.
you know, you get you do your best. You know, and could they have done that with the Melting Face record, or even the Security record? You know, it's hard to know. You know,
yeah, no.
Or if you take that record and like added, you know, done it in 1990 instead. There's like so many variables.
Yeah, so many factors come together. But the point I was trying to make is that within these factors that play a role, there must have been a bias, some end that kind of like.
Let's go with this.
Yes, and yeah. Hey, do you need to go?
Yeah,
I need to go as well.
Good conversation.
Yeah, it was awesome. So next week, same time.
Yeah, or Friday.
Or Friday, okay.
Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at some time, at some point, we need to talk about how we want to put this stuff out, right?
I have a concept.
Cool. Okay, yeah, I'll see you tomorrow anyway.
Yeah, tomorrow, right? Exactly.
Yes.
All right.
Okay. Bye for now. Bye.
Bye.